state of Florida, but so I service
Apologies.
the no, you're good. So I service the entire state of Florida, but mostly I kind of work in the Clay, Duval, and St. Johns County area. As you can see, this is my contact information. If you don't already have it, direct cell number, email, as well as my website. And my website pretty much pulls, and that's actually supposed to be sales with an S. So if you're writing down my website, just a correction, it's DSELLS Jax.com.
In the chat as well.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, so pretty much going to that website, you can always get the most updated information as far as like properties and everything that's out there. It's going to be much more updated than what Zillow may be. I know that's like the main shopping place that a lot of customers like to go to is Zillow. But if you go directly to my website, you can pull all the most updated information because it pulls from the state's MLS. So that's a little spill from me.
And my name's Victoria. I'm VP of Mortgage Lending. I'm actually based in Baltimore City. I live up in Baltimore, but me and Derrick have been working together for a very long time, and I'm licensed in both the state of Maryland and Florida. And I have a lot of family that lives out there as well. So I know the area very well. Personally, I work with a lot of first-time home buyers along with Derrick, and we're gonna get into the process in general, but really I like to dedicate my time to educating my clients and making sure they understand the process. This is going to be one of probably the biggest purchase of your life, and you want to make sure that you understand everything along the way, and you're working with a team that actually cares about what you want and what your goals are. We don't just want to get you in and get you out. And my direct contact information is there, rate.com/Victoria Johnson, victoria.johnson@rate.com, and my cell phone number is there, so you can feel free to call, text me after this as well. So this is just a quick overview of kind of what this presentation is going to look like. So we have 4 main points. First and foremost, we're going to go over the overview of the home buying process, pretty much what it looks like overall, give you a very broad view. Then we're going to get into a little more of the nitty gritty as far as what it looks like to specifically get pre-approved, what makes a strong offer, what helps you stand out in the market, and then some important do's and don'ts and what you definitely should do and definitely shouldn't do while buying a home. Derrick, if you want to go ahead and take this one.
Oh, yeah, sure. So pretty much home buying process. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this too. We've learned working with so many first-time home buyers, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I don't know if it's scare tactics that some realtors or loan officers use or whatever it may be, but they make the home buying process sound so much harder and more complicated than what it actually is. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Typically, you can get your realtor before you get your loan officer, but you need to get a pre-approval before you start shopping for a home, simply because you don't want to establish, a budget and say, oh, well, I would be qualified for 400,000. You're looking for these houses in the 400,000 range. Then you go to your loan officer and you can only get approved for, let's say, 250,000. So now, you're adjusting your budget and things of that nature. So you always want to get your pre-approval first. So that would be going through Victoria. She's the one who's going to gather all the documentation, see what you can qualify for, get together with you on your credit, everything of that nature. Once she gives that pre-approval, whatever that particular number is, she turns it over to me. That's when I start shopping around for the home. Typically, the way I like to deal with my customers is I like them to tell me what they want. I'm not the type of realtor that's going to tell you where you should live, what you should have, or anything of that nature. If you tell me I want to be in this particular area, Derrick, that's where I'm going to find a home for you. I'm not going to just give you these suggestions of where I think you should be. Now, if it's something in the sense of like, maybe there's some repair issues along with the home, it's my job to, bring that to light to you. If you still want to move forward, that's up to you. But it is my job to make you aware of those things. But it's not my job to tell you where to live or what's worth it and what's not worth it. So I would send a list out to my customers that falls into the range and the search criteria of what they desire. And from there, that's when we start booking showing appointments, going out to different houses, and from the finding your dream home, that's when we're under contract. From the under contract portion, I'm going to let Victoria speak, more on the mortgage side, but just from my side, I'm the one who do, the negotiating with the contract, whether it's asking for closing costs or, shortening time periods or what the closing date should be, things of that nature. So that normally falls on my end. The number crunching and everything, as far as in that sense, is more so on Victoria's end. So that's one of the reasons why we work so well together. We don't step on one another's toes.
Yep.
I stay in my lane. She may advise me, and she stays in her lane, and so on and so on. And then from there, pretty much, it's really a lot simpler than what it is. I promise you, I'm not just making it sound so simple. This is just really how it goes. You get a pre-approval, we find a home, you go into contract. If people tell you that, oh, it takes like 45, 60 days, that's not true. Sometimes through extensions, things happen. Yeah, it could take, maybe like a 40-day or whatever. But for the most part, myself and Victoria, we get customers closed in 30 days. Honestly, we've had the one customer, what was it? We got a clear close in like, 10 days?
Yep, 10 days.
Yeah, so it was a customer we had before. She was on top of her documentation. We got it closed, clear to close in 10 days. The only reason we end up closing like in 20 somewhat days is simply because the sellers were surprised that we were able to get it closed that fast, and they just weren't ready to move out. Yep. So typically it takes 25 to 30 days, I would say, for us to get you closed. And that would be closing day where you go, you sign a lot of paperwork, make sure you get your hand exercises in because you're going to need it. Hand is going to be cramping up that day, but you're going to have a smile on your face because you finally got to that day. You can feel relieved. We take our picture, and we're the type of folks where it doesn't stop at closing. I tell my customers all the time, I literally have every single phone number of every single customer I've ever closed with. So anytime they would hit me up, I still know who it is, because a lot of times I may want to send you a closing gift after the fact. You may have some questions about the Homestead Act or whatever it is. I even have people who like set up security systems for a lot of my customers. So I try to provide like a full service for every customer that I deal with. But I'll let you get, speak more on, as far as what you're looking for with pre-approval and, like the mortgage process and everything.
Yeah, definitely. So as Derrick said, of course, before you start touring homes and before you fall in love with something, it's super important to make sure that you get a pre-approval. And there's a big difference between getting a pre-approval and something just as simple as a pre-qualification. So the very first step is for you to submit your mortgage application. You and I will have a phone call. I'll send you a link to either my website or an app. And all of this will be linked in the information at the end as well. And it should take you 10 to 15 minutes to complete. So that's your information based on your credit, your income, your employment, your bank statements, all of the information that you are putting in for your own application. And then after I review it, I will send you a list of documentation that we'll need. And that's where I'll collect things like your W-2s, your pay stubs, your tax returns, and do your income calculation just to make sure that the information you put on your application matches up to what you actually make in terms of your income and how much you actually have in your bank account. Now, the last step of that process, we'll just reconnect after I take a look at everything, and we'll work backwards to find out where you're comfortable. Just because you qualify to purchase a really expensive house doesn't mean that's what you want to pay every single month. And part of finalizing your pre-approval process is making sure you're comfortable. I'm not going to give you a threshold or a payment or a mortgage in general that you don't feel comfortable paying. And we don't want to send you out looking at homes that are above or below your price range. We want you to be able to sleep at night and, be happy with the decision that you made. This way, when you do find the right home, we can strike right away. You get your offer accepted and we can move things really quickly on a home that you actually want to purchase, not just one that you might have seen. And that process, after that, of course, I'll send it over to Derrick as well. We'll send your pre-approval letter over, you'll start touring homes, and then you can just come back to me when the contract gets accepted.
And just one thing to add on that too, myself and Victoria, we build our brand on honesty and transparency, things of that nature. So we're not the type where Victoria tells me, oh, well, this particular customer's approved for 500,000, but they said that they want their mortgage payments to be around, let's just say 1,800.
Right.
And I know that with a $500,000 house, you can't get a mortgage payment of 1,800.
Right.
So we're going to adjust your budget based on what you want to pay for your mortgage, not based on what you're approved for. Right. So a lot of realtors, sometimes they're going to push you towards the most expensive house. And I get it because, at the end of the day, the higher the house is, the more we as realtors are going to make commission on that. But I'm going to get my money regardless, and it's not like I'm hurting for customers or anything like that. So I try to always put the customer and the customer needs first. That's why I continue to go back to Victoria and always bring my clientele to her, because she's the one loan officer that I trust and know that she has that same track mind. A lot of these other loan officers, I don't bash anyone or anything like that. I just know I've worked with some before, but they don't have that same track mind where put the customer first, not put my paycheck first.
Right.
Oh, V, do you want to say anything on, because it seems like that's something going on, a lot of self-employed stuff. We have customers that come across that, as well as I understand that, like, apps like Credit Karma, Experian
Yep.
will show one thing, but your system shows something different.
Definitely. So first and foremost, for self-employed borrowers, of course, you're not going to have pay stubs, but we are going to look at your tax returns and 1099s if you pay yourself that way. Now, a lot of the time, self-employed buyers have difficulty getting qualified for conventional or FHA mortgages because of the way that they file their taxes. So even though that is pretty common, we have a lot of different ways that there are either other programs that we can broker out or other types of ways of calculating your income in order to get you qualified so that you're not stressed out about whether or not you can buy a home or if you have 2 years of W-2 income or not. Being self-employed doesn't equate to not being able to purchase a home. And there's multiple avenues. It just takes, frankly, somebody to sit and explain it to you and you to voice what you're looking for. We're really big on communication. Like Derrick said, if it's something that you want, we got it. We'll get it done for you. It's just about making sure that we understand what you're looking for and what exactly the best option is for you. Like Derrick said, not just chasing a check. Now, as far as credit and Credit Karma is concerned, there's a lot of apps. There's Credit Karma, there's Experian Boost, there's a lot of banking apps that will help you monitor your credit. They are really good as a guide, just so you can make sure that nothing strange is listed on your credit report. However, 99% of the time, I would say your actual credit score is not the same as what's listed on those apps. The credit bureaus themselves use a completely different scoring model than those apps do, even if it is Experian Boost. Even just because it says Experian doesn't mean it comes directly from the credit bureaus. So unfortunately, a lot of the time we'll have clients that think their credit score is much higher or much lower than what it actually is. So again, those are really meant to be used as just a guide to monitor your credit and look more so at the accounts that are listed, not to rely as heavily on that score specifically.
And one last thing too, for self-employed individuals, we're not going to get too in-depth in it because myself and Victoria have already talked about it. We plan on making this a series. So eventually we're going to come out with like another one, talking even more about taxes and everything of that nature, bringing on a tax professional. But self-employed folks, and I'm also speaking from experience because I'm self-employed as well, be careful with how you file your taxes, especially when it comes to that time where you're looking into purchasing a home. Even if you're not fully self-employed, if you're partially self-employed, just be careful with how you file your taxes. I'm just speaking based off of some experiences that we've had with some prior customers before. But yeah, just be mindful of how you file your taxes. And like Victoria said, it's going to be like those last 2 years. So if you're the type of person where you write off a lot of things so you don't have that big tax bill, plan ahead of time and say, okay, in 2 years, I want to buy a home. So maybe I need to dial back on some of the things I'm writing off.
And make sure that you communicate that with your tax preparer, especially, if you're doing your taxes on your own, that's one thing to make sure you keep in mind. But especially if you're working with a tax preparer, a lot of the times their goals, of course, is to make sure that they do what they can to compliantly get you the least tax bill possible. But what's the most tax advantageous is definitely not what is always advantageous for getting a mortgage. And just because you make a lot of money and have a lot of cash flow doesn't mean that that's what you're reporting to the IRS at the end of the year. And of course, when you're getting a conventional mortgage, we can only qualify you on what you claim to the IRS. So just make sure that you're being mindful of that. Not to say to totally change what you're doing, but just be mindful of what you do and do not claim and what your plan is for 2 years ahead. I'm going to let Derrick go ahead and discuss what makes a really strong offer and what can help get your offer accepted now.
And so making a strong offer, it really just kind of depends on what the market is. So I would probably say just now is really the market's balancing out a little bit, and I can really only speak for, here in Florida. But here in Florida, the market has been kind of balancing out some, where I'm not seeing where we have to bid as far over asking price as it was like just a couple months ago. A few months ago, I'd be working with customers and we would literally have to first offer offhand, we got to offer 20, 25K over asking price. I recently even just got an offer accepted where we were requesting closing costs. And I haven't seen that in like 2 years. The last time I had a customer get closing costs paid was probably about 2 years. So that alone tells me that the market is kind of balancing out. Some of my contacts over at KB Homes and DR Horton, I've been seeing where new construction prices have been being slashed by 10 to 20 grand. So well, this is something I always tell people. Anytime someone asks me the question, when is a good time to buy? My answer is always going to be now. Because with the real estate market, you just never know. It's a gamble. So you never know what's going to happen in the future. Right now, yes, rates are fairly, kind of high, especially, looking at what the average normally is. But purchase prices are kind of dwindling down a little bit. It's not as much competition where you got 20 folks bidding for one home. You may have a couple folks, trying to get one home. And like I said, too, now people are like actually considering as well as accepting offers where you're asking them to pay a portion of your closing costs. It was a time a few months ago where if a customer's like, oh, can we ask for closing costs? And I would just flat out tell them we would be wasting our time because nobody was even considering those type of offers. But so, like I say, it just really all depends on the state of the market and where we're at that particular point as far as like what type of offers we should offer. As far as the numbers, down payment, if it's FHA, it's usually going to be 3.5% of the purchase price. If it's conventional, 5%. That's also something else to take into account. When Victoria gives you that pre-approval number, you need to make sure that you would be able to pay that down payment because the higher the purchase price, the more of a down payment. And yes, we do have down payment assistance programs, but they're not always going to pay the entire down payment for you. You may pay like 7,500, 10 grand, maybe up to 15 grand, but it's not always going to pay that entire down payment. So always keep that in mind. The binder deposit or earnest money deposit, whichever folks prefer to use, that's usually what you're going to pay after your offer gets accepted. So after the seller says, this is the offer that I want, they sign off on it, we have a fully executed deal, that's the deposit you're going to turn into the title company within 3 business days typically. That number is going to go towards your down payment number. So let's say your down payment is 10 grand and you submit a $2,000 earnest money deposit. So now at closing, you only have to pay $8,000 for your down payment. So it just subtracts from that. The binder, the type of loan that you have typically determines how strong of an offer is. Folks definitely look at conventional in a better light than they look at FHA. Don't ask me why. It's kind of a biased thing. And that's another one of those myths that people have that like, oh, FHA is so bad and everything like that. FHA protects the buyer more. And sometimes, especially depending on what condition that home is in, sometimes the seller doesn't want to accept that because they don't want to have to, in so many words, jump through those hoops and everything of that nature. But there's nothing wrong with getting an FHA loan. That doesn't mean you're less of a person than someone who can afford, a conventional loan or whatever it may be. So looking at that, little small intricate details as far as the inspection period, that, makes a strong offer, how quickly you can close. So a lot of those things typically make a strong offer. But I'm the type, as well as Victoria, we don't just tell you things to do, we educate you on it. I want my buyers, sellers, whoever to always walk away from the process and feel like, okay, if I needed to do this in the future without a realtor, I could. Granted, I don't want you to because I want you to come back. So because I'm trying to make a living over here. But if you did get to that point, though, I would somewhat still feel kind of good knowing that that first experience you had with me, I was able to educate you to the point where you're like, okay, I can handle this on my own now. So that's what we try to do. We're not just going to tell you things and not explain it to you. I'm going to explain every single thing. If you want me to walk through every line of the contract with you to explain it, I'm going to do just that. So that's just a few details of kind of what makes a strong offer.
I don't really have much to add on that. I think you said it all. Took the words right out of my mouth on that one. Now, I'd love to go over these do's and don'ts. These are things that Derrick probably hears me say way too many times. And just busting some misconceptions, but also kind of discussing differences between, like Derek was saying, FHA and conventional loans, and why these do's and don'ts impact things so much. So first and foremost, just starting with the biggest do not change anything regarding your income. And when we say anything, we mean absolutely anything. Do not quit your job. Do not get a raise. Do not get a promotion. Do not work more or less hours. If you're self-employed, do not change anything regarding your business or your cash flow or your ownership. Any sort of differentiation in your income can cause it to be calculated differently. So if you're scheduled to work 40 hours a week, and then all of a sudden you only start working 35 hours a week, that's not the same amount of income that we qualified you on. So if we get to the end of the process and we're doing a final verification of employment, and you're not working as many hours as you used to, or you're working more, that totally changes your loan profile, and we have to send everything back to underwriting again. So we have seen where somebody tries to switch jobs or quit their job in the middle of the process. Unfortunately, sometimes I understand it's necessary and things happen, but if you're planning on doing anything regarding your income or your job, either do it before or after you purchase your home so that it can be handled properly. We have had way too many problems with things like this. And that's why we want to educate our borrowers so much, because you may think that taking one extra sick day doesn't make a difference, but it could. So, there are ways to make sure that we explain things, and there are, you don't need to be absolutely perfect, but you do need to communicate with us, and you do need to make sure that everything's explained to us so that we can calculate your income correctly. And just for the most part, try your hardest to not make any changes.
Now, just for conversational purposes, now, obviously, if a person's trying to buy a home and they quit their job, we've actually experienced that before.
Right.
I know that, it's quite unlikely we're going to be able to get them to the closing table.
Right.
But I'm sure some folks are probably sitting back thinking like, man, if I get a raise or promotion, I'm making more money. Why would that be an issue? Can you just kind of like touch on that more? Like,
Definitely.
do you feel that would be to the sense where they wouldn't be able to get to closing, or just more of a resubmitting documents?
So if you were to just get like a raise and it was, very similar to what you had been making before, then it's just more documentation and more time. So you might not, it might be more time consuming, and we might not be able to close on time because we have to have your whole, your income viewed by underwriting again. If you are getting a promotion, where that becomes a problem is if you're doing something, not in a similar line or something different than what you were doing in your previous position. So even if it may be quote unquote a promotion, if your job functionality is different, that changes your employment history. And so that can pose a problem for your 2-year history when getting qualified for a mortgage, because it's a totally different position. It's as if, you left one job and started another one. That can be something that could cause you to not get to the closing table, depending on, how long that process is for your promotion and how quickly it takes effect. Anything else on that, Derek?
No, and I just want to, as Victoria goes, because this is the last slide, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, as Victoria goes through these last three, those of you who are in the room, if you have any questions to mind, start dropping them in the chat now, because I'm just being mindful of what is the little clock for the remaining meeting time. Yep. And we want to make sure that we can get to any questions before it kicks us out. So start dropping your questions in the chat box now, and she goes through these last three.
I'm going to go through these next a little bit quicker, but another big one. When we say don't open up any new accounts, that includes buying a car. One of the biggest things that we run into that can kill a deal is purchasing a car. Your credit gets ran a million times by the car companies, and your payment on your credit goes up by $200, $300, $400. That can very quickly disqualify you and make it so you can no longer afford the home you're under contract. That also includes any credit cards. Just because it's a $20 payment, it does impact your DTI, and it will impact whether or not you can qualify for the home. So you should not be getting your credit ran or opening or closing any accounts while you're trying to get a mortgage. Now, do make sure that you pay all of your bills on time and use them as you normally would. So don't start paying things off left and right if you normally would not do that. Use your credit cards as you normally would if you have them. Don't use them if you don't. Make your payments on time. Make sure that all your ducks are in a row and you don't have anything that could negatively impact your credit score. And then the last one, make sure that your collections, you try to keep them below $2,000. If you have, this doesn't apply to medical collections quite as much, but things like old credit cards or electricity bills, phone bills, things like that, that can just linger on your credit. We need to try to keep those below $2,000 because they do pose a problem later on in the process for FHA loans specifically, and as well as disputing your accounts. If you have a bunch of disputed accounts on your credit report, if it's more than $1,000, we do have to get them removed. Or paid. We have to explain them. Nothing really should be disputed on your credit report unless it's a case of fraud. Just because there was a misunderstanding in a payment, that doesn't equate to your credit being disputed. So that's where that can pose a problem. And again, that doesn't apply to every single loan program. Specifically for FHA loans, there are similar rules for conventional loans as well. They are a little bit more lenient, but this is a general rule of thumb to keep your credit report intact. Anything to add on those, Derek?
No, you do a great job of covering it all. And just to say, so we have like 5.5 minutes left. So, but I want to say too, if you ever look in the sense of like, oh, well, I want to work with Victoria, but I don't want to work with Derrick, or I want to work with Derrick, but I don't want to work with Victoria. Never think that, you can't do that. Myself and Victoria, we work best together. I tell her all the time, anytime I'm working with other loan officers, I tell her she has me spoiled because a lot of times other loan officers don't have as great of a communication stream to the realtor. And when you have that, that break in communication, it makes the process a lot harder. And we try to make the process as enjoyable and easy and fun as we possibly can for our customers. I mean, this is a serious thing that you're doing, but at the same time, we want you to enjoy it. You're putting out a lot of money, you're making a major decision. At the end of the day, the place that you reside and you lay your head at should be like one of the most important decisions that you make all the time. So if you ever felt the need, like, I don't want Derrick as my realtor, or I don't want Victoria as my loan officer, don't think that you have to use the both of us. We will prefer you do that because we enjoy working together. We've been doing it for years, though. We got a question, V. I think that's more so your lane.
Yeah. So any negative information on your credit score, it really depends on what it is specifically. But if you're talking about like a collection or a dispute or something like that, just because you have something negative on your credit report doesn't mean you're disqualified for a mortgage. Derrick and I work with plenty of people that we help them get their credit where it needs to be to qualify. However, just because you had, a couple collections or a couple late payments on your credit, that doesn't just disqualify you for a mortgage. Really, it's just making sure that your credit score itself meets the threshold, and, things like the collections below $2,000 and rules like that stay intact, not necessarily just negative information. Of course, there's limitations to that. If you already have a mortgage and you're trying to buy another home and you're late on your mortgage, that can disqualify you from purchasing another home. But, just because you went late on a credit card last year, it doesn't mean you can't buy a house.
And student loans does not disqualify you from buying a house. I don't know where folks get that from, but student loans does not disqualify you. It will bring your debt to income ratio down, but it does not disqualify you from actually buying a house. I'm on my second house now, and I went all the way through grad school, so I have a nice chunk of student loans, but it never kept me from buying a house. So don't let anyone tell you that just because you have student loans, you're not gonna be able to buy a house. That's false information.
I mean, Sharnice, if I answered your question, if I didn't answer your question completely, let me know, or if you have any other questions. But yeah, if any of you have any questions, we can go ahead and please put them in the chat. Unless you have anything else, Derrick, to touch on, I think we're good in terms of just waiting for any questions to trickle in. Thank you, Sharnice.
We have 2.5 minutes, so last call for any questions, anything. You see our contact information up there. Victoria, she put in the correction to my website.
I'm going to do it again at the end.
Okay. In the chat box. And we both are on like Facebook, Instagram. My Facebook is D Sales Jacks. My Instagram, if I'm not mistaken, is also D Sales Jacks. So it's all under the one brand name that you can find me. And then I know some of you already have our like direct numbers. So if anything comes up, you can always, shoot us a text, give us a call after this, tomorrow, whenever.
Yep.
If you've worked with myself and Victoria before, you already know that we answer pretty much all the time.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to, so I know that's more Victoria, but I can tell you in this market it's going to be hard simply because of interest rates. And that's why. And if you wanted your mortgage to be $1,000, it would literally be like what would they have to be? Almost like a $80,000 house, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's impossible. It's just, it is possible, but you also have to take into consideration that in your mortgage payment, it's your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes. So all of that combined, getting to $1,000, your purchase price would probably have to be, like Derrick said, between $80,000 and $100,000 for it to equate to $100,000 at this point. But depending on your location, we can have that conversation of what tax rates look like in your area and what interest rate you qualify for. So just keep that, as a good rule of thumb range for right now in this market.
And honestly, if it's like $80,000 to $1,000, it's going to end up being somewhere that you're going to have to put so much work into the home. You're actually going to end up paying more later on anyway.
I think that's what most of what you've seen in the area and in that price range as of now. Yeah.
So it says we have less than a minute. It's not telling us the exact time. So I don't want it to just click off on everyone. Right. So we want to give an official sign off. Thank you everyone for joining. This is recorded, so we're also going to share it on all of our social medias as well.
Definitely. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks again, Derrick. And you guys reach out to us if you need anything.
Now, have a good evening.